Hey guys, this is Alan with Devil May Play, and we're presenting a brand new episode, and it's the first episode of the new year.
Hooray, we can finally kick 2016 to the curb. Hey guys, Trip here, and I am enjoying these delicious brownies that I may or may not have spiked with liquor.
And I'm just enjoying a regular adult beverage that I
He's
purchased
boring like
earlier.
that.
I'm so boring. So, speaking of boring, what did you think of Rogue One? I'm just kidding. No. First of all, this episode is going to be about Rogue One because I was obsessed and still am obsessed with Star Wars to a level that
Same
I
here.
think some people are at the same level, but not many. As in, I would memorize characteristics of different Star Wars races and could recite them from memory when I was like
Fuck yeah,
12 and
man.
13. Like the essential guides were pretty much like my Bible for many years. For anyone that read
Same
those
here.
essential guides to
Yep.
vehicles and vessels and whatnot. So before we get into that, I'm sure this is going to be a deep episode. I just want to do a little bit of light, catching up. I've been on a business trip for 3 weeks, so Trip and I haven't gotten to talk too much, and just wanted to share some thoughts on games. I picked up Pokemon Sun, and I've been enjoying that. I beat Dishonored 2 recently, which was really fun. I think we could do a whole episode on that game, honestly, but we'll save that for another date. And then finally, I just beat this game called Inside. Only took me one day, but it was super
Yeah.
cool. So I was really, sometimes I think personally I like to have a break from AAA titles with just those little indie, one day, one sitting titles. I think they're awesome.
Definitely.
They're good palate cleanser when you've just finished like a 30 or 40-hour game. What about you? Have you been playing anything or done anything exciting recently besides your adventure, which we'll save for the very end?
Oh yes. Most of you who know me over the internet know that I am a rather large, pathetic, wimpy nerd. And I'm not very known for my adventures and excursions, but this New Year's was interesting, and we'll get to that towards the end of the episode. But in terms of what I've been playing, um, you mentioned Inside in an indie title and how it's a good palate cleanser. Well, I've been having a somewhat similar experience with a game I've talked about recently on the channel called Tides of Numenera.
Okay.
Now, yeah, you guys, if you've seen my episode where I just went crazy over that series, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's this new RPG from the people who made, was it from the people who made Pillars? No, it's not from people who made Pillars of Eternity. I think it was some similar people, but it's in the same vein as a Pillars of Eternity or Tyranny. It's the spiritual successor to Planescape Torment, but it takes place in a whole new universe and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I mean, you guys know I'm obsessed with the Numenera universe, so that's already sold for me. But in terms of the gameplay, at first I was kind of split because I wasn't really getting into the combat of the game, even though I loved everything else. But I started to get the hang of it and figured out a bit about what you're supposed to do. And I guess the best thing I can say about it is that I was incredibly angry when the beta was over because I needed to play more.
Okay.
So I guess there's no better sign of whether or not you're enjoying a game than if it infuriates you when it cuts you off. I was so mad.
And we'll put a
But
shameless
like
plug for that
I'm
video.
finally gonna yeah, I was like, I'm finally gonna go to a new location. Holy shit, cool. And then it's like, thanks for playing the beta. Fuck you. No, I'm kidding. I love you guys, but still, fuck that. That
It's a
pissed me off a
top-down
lot.
game, right? Top-down third-person RPG.
Yeah, and the thing is, I really have a weird thing against isometric games for very nitpicky reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because, like, again, it's really nitpicky, but I hate the fact that I just can't look around freely.
Yeah, I think I
Like,
understand that. It's
it
hard
it's
for
really
you to be in
so,
the like characters' eyes are behind them. Like you want to
yeah,
see the different vistas and landscapes and stuff.
and at like the same angle all the time. Like you can never see like what's on like the wall, like on a certain wall or something. And it's like, again, it's super nitpicky, but like it pisses me off a little bit. And
Hmm.
it takes a lot for me to get past that and get into an isometric game.
Well,
Now I play them every now and then, mostly because isometric RPGs are typically the ones that put the biggest focus on story and choice
mhm.
and immersion, stuff like games like Arcanum, Pillars of Eternity, Tyranny, stuff like that. So that's why I often end up playing them. But I would personally always prefer almost anything but isometric in any of those games.
And I'm
That's just
sure
me.
it's like something to do with the budget. You know what I mean? Because they're
That
trying
too.
to,
Yeah, definitely.
Because
Definitely.
you once you fully render a 3D world, it's a lot more, I'm sure, intensive as far as building software and whatnot. Well, that's
Yeah.
awesome. I saw your video and I was interested. And like you, I kind of was not put off by the isometric view, but I'm used to. I'll put it like this: I grew up in the N64 days, so 3D is like almost a prerequisite for me. And I know that sounds. I'm sure some like older gamers are just sighing and unsubscribing as I say this, but that's just really how it is. Now with that's not as a standard rule. It's not that I won't play 2D games. It's that like you, I think that having a fully 3D world adds to the immersion, but in rare cases, it can work really well. And I think if in this case, it's certainly like a necessary thing, I'm sure, for the budget that they have. Because you can either get like a really nice, great looking game, but it's not necessarily always the most well developed. We won't even name any examples, but that's great, man. I might even check it out when it comes out. I'll see what you think. I'm sure you'll play it. It might be one of those games that I pick up. You know, and it's as I get older, I get more and more like, what's the word? Persnickety or some other word like that.
Picky?
Well, it's just picky. Where it's like, even like Final Fantasy 15. I watched a friend show me some footage from that game, and it looks beautiful. But I'm like, the time has to be right for me to pick up a game now. It's like I have to be in the mood, and I have to have the free time to really invest it. It's not like when I was a kid, I was like, as soon as I can buy a video game, I'm going to. Now I'm thinking about all these other factors. Like, am I gonna have time to play it? Am I gonna be gone? Like, am I really in the mood for another like 100-hour plus JRPG or something? So it's kind of like I play games when I get to them. Same thing with Inside. Like, I heard a lot of buzz about that game. I certainly am not like by any means jumping on that bandwagon because that game came out a while ago, I think. But I play games when I get to them, and then I enjoy them all the more for that.
Yeah, for me, it's more of a money thing, being a broke college kid.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, that's really the basis of everything. Like, I have to really be picky about, like, okay, I want all of these games, but which ones am I willing to pay for at the expense of the others?
And once you get burned once or twice from a shitty game that's $60 or whatever, you learn that lesson.
Next.
So there you go. Well, in any case, sounds like you've been having fun playing Tides of Numenera. Is it Numenera? Tides of Numenera?
Yeah.
Numenera?
Yeah.
But we're talking about Star Wars, not
Fuck yeah, man.
So I think I don't want to recap too much what's already been said. I can throw out some like things I liked and things I didn't like, but I actually wrote a blog post about this today. My first blog post, and if you want a little bit further in-depth explanation, check that out. I'm going to link it in the description. I'm trying out this new thing where I'm writing because I'm supposed to be a writer. And it's tough because you put your work out there and you know people are just going to disagree with you and the internet's going to shit down your throat. But point is, I brought up 2 points that I don't think too many people have talked about. And I'll talk real quickly about my overall impressions of the film, and then these 2 points. And I think we should each pick something we liked and didn't like a lot, and something maybe that we haven't seen before, because I already have 2 things picked out of my mind. Just for initial impressions, I really enjoyed it. I thought the third act was crazy good. Vader was and all this is spoilers, of course.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
sorry. We're just going to say it now.
Right now. We should probably put
spoilers ahead. I'm going to put a
but,
huge spoilers text right over the video.
Yeah,
right now.
So if you guys don't want spoilers on this,
maybe I'll have like a
be
spoiler siren of just like spoilers, like something obnoxious as hell.
We'll work that out. But yeah, if you guys don't want to be spoiled on this will likely be the bulk of the episode. So
Yes.
Alan, I'm still gonna call you Lark. I'm still gonna call you Lark for the rest of your life. So Lark over here, he's really good with delineating and separating all the different topics. So he's probably gonna put a spoiler warning on this section of the podcast. So if you want to just skip right over that into our little aftermath, my story about getting drunk and making out with a bunch of people or whatever I'm gonna tell, that may or may not be true. I'm just leaving you guys hanging. But anyway. If you want to skip to that part, that's fine, but we will be getting into spoilers. So continue.
My favorite scene, hands down, was the Vader scene. And simply because I saw it with my dad and we were talking afterwards and I said that 1 minute scene like erased and redeemed the Vader erased the three episodes that came before, and it redeemed the Vader character in terms of making him a badass again in a 1 minute scene. And that's something that they couldn't do at all in episode 3. He just came off as angry and emo, and I don't even want to get into the prequels. But I'm saying the things that I think that have already been said many times before that make me really feel like this film was a success rather than a disappointment to me personally. The idea that it enhances A New Hope, in my opinion, because you really understand the stakes better, and that convenient plot point is explained, the Death Star having that fatal flaw. Yeah. And because they gave the rebels a shade of gray. And maybe I'll bring up that point again. Actually, before we get into your impression, real quick, I thought it was cool. I'm sure other people noticed this, but I thought that Saw Gerrera was definitely shown to be kind of like the rebel counterpoint to Vader, both in terms of his physical appearance and just his ideologies of like fight the fight no matter what the cost. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at him, he had that respirator and mechanical legs and just looked like the shit had been kicked out of him. So I thought that was really cool. And I know a lot of people didn't really like his character for whatever reason, but I thought he was a good addition. So what about you, Trip? I know I just talked for like 5 minutes, so...
No, it's cool.
Fire
it's
away.
Cool. I intentionally, and I do this with every Star Wars thing, and basically anything Star Wars or World of Warcraft related, I tend to completely shut out all other opinions until I'm ready to accept both the love and the hate for them. Because for almost anything else in the world, I'm totally willing to just shit all over things I love. But just those two things kind of have a special place in my heart, and I like to enjoy them before I hear the negative stuff. You know what I mean? So I have no idea whatsoever what anybody else thinks about Rogue One. I don't know how I managed to avoid it, but I did. I have no clue what the world's perception is of that movie. I don't even know what the Rotten Tomato score is. See, okay, so the first third of the movie. Now, I'll let you know that we had just got back from the bar when we got to the movie. So I don't know if it was just me still slightly tipsy or not. I still don't, but I found the first third of the movie a little disjointed, a little like, jumping from thing to thing too quickly. I also, I think going into it, I also thought the movie was going to be shorter than it was. So I was assuming like, this is it. We're not getting enough, character development. We're not getting enough this or that. So it kind of soured my mood just slightly. I was never saying I don't like this movie, but I was just thinking, okay, this is just slightly above average. And I love Star Wars. So of course I'm going to think that. So I can't really think objectively. So all that in mind, though, I still did enjoy the entire first half of the movie. It was just those things were, kind of on my mind. I was thinking, like we were going to wrap up a lot sooner than we did. So I was thinking, if they end here, I'm not sure how I'm going to feel. But then that fucking third act kicks in.
Yep. Everybody talks about it.
Jesus H. Christ. What the fuck? That was the best Star Wars shit I've seen in my life. Like,
not one for exaggeration.
Kidding me with that shit? Like, I can't with that shit, man. It was ridiculous. Like,
I'm with you. Fanboy out. Let's fanboy out a little bit.
Like, another kind of sort of problem I had with the movie in the first half was that I wasn't sure if they were properly mixing the kind of campiness that Star Wars is known for the more serious tone. Because, the tone was more serious, and I'm all for that. But they were also still doing, the other stuff I love about Star Wars, like some of the big, lofty speeches about hope and stuff like that. And I'm like, if this were episode 7, yeah, but I'm not sure if I'm feeling that in a story that's, the rest of it is a lot darker. But somehow in that third act, they married that shit perfectly. People were dying. There was all this crazy shit going on. And yet you still had that kind of, jaunty, optimistic, against adversity, kind of campy fun that Star Wars is known for, you know, them dressing up in disguises as Imperial officers and shit and infiltrating the place, you know, the droid doing all that funny shit and then dying right after. That was probably the best example of, I think, them finally getting the identity of that film perfectly right and marrying Star Wars's, you know, the camp that comes with it, which I love, with, you know, a more serious emotional thing. It was at that moment. I was already loving the movie up to that point, especially in that last act, but it was at that moment where I'm like, holy shit, they did it. They did it. And before I go any further, just what they ended up doing with all of the characters, I can't believe they had the balls. I cannot believe they had the balls to do it, but they did. Well, and that could have been the most depressing ending of all time, or they could have pushed out and it could have been the most, you know, wimpy ending of all time. But no, they did both. They ended it with that perfect little Star Wars campy, cheesy line that just got my heart racing. That last line by Carrie Fisher. Oh my God. I'm sorry. That was just bonkers, man. I couldn't with that shit. I loved that last word. Oh, it was so great. Anyway, keep going.
I really love it, man. I love the enthusiasm. Well, I think most people would agree that the film progressively gets better. Like, by the third act, like, if the third act wasn't as strong as it was, I don't think fans would have forgiven kind of the rocky pace of the first half. Because you trust me, you're not the only person to point that out. And I have one of my problems with the film has a lot to do with the first half. Like, you got introduced to like 3 or 4 planets within a span of like 10 minutes, and
yeah, that was so jarring.
Jin's character is just problematic for me, but I'll get back to that. But the things that really succeeded to me in this, things that made this movie succeed to me, there were moments just from a pure emotional, visceral standpoint, like there were just moments that I don't think existed in Force Awakens. Now, I will say that I still like Force Awakens a little bit more because of the characters and because it just felt a little bit more like Star Wars, even though I liked that this tone was different. The Force Awakens overall, I think, was more enjoyable. Like, as an average, as a whole, I enjoy myself through The Force Awakens a little bit more than this one. But the third act for this one is just nuts. Like you said, like the stakes are so, so high. And seeing these characters, you know, sacrifice themselves for the cause, it was awesome. And the moments that really killed me, like, I was literally, like, shaking with, like, fanboy excitement, where the Hammerhead scene, when Vader shows up and his Star Destroyer just fucks everything up. Like, he pops out of hyperspace, fucks everything up. I thought of that scene from Dexter, if anyone's seen that show, where the detective comes out and he's like, surprise, motherfucker. Like, I thought of that. I was like, Vader just surprised this dude. And, but I'm going to try, I will say I'm super biased, but I try to be unbiased because, of course, I am a storyteller. I try to look at what I liked and what I didn't like and be analytical about it, and that's what we do. So, with that being said, let's talk about something that I don't think too many people are talking about. You know, most people agree that the final act was exciting. Some people have problems with the characters, saying that they're underdeveloped or boring or whatever. I'm not even going to touch on that because I'll touch on that on my later point. Also, my phone has got to stop fucking ringing. Sorry if you can hear that. Anyways, so the thing that I think a lot of people are underestimating is Orson Krennic, which is the main bad guy. And I think that this film established a villain that isn't necessarily as remarkable or iconic or even, like, talked about as Vader. Because Vader shows up and steals the show and everyone's like, Vader, Vader, Vader. Trust me, I understand. It's still my favorite scene from the movie. But with Orson Krennic, I really liked him because he was a working class villain. And because they showed that strife between him and Moff Tarkin. So you get the sense that this dude, his life is on the line if he fucks this up. Or at least his career.
Yep.
So you can understand why he is so driven to make sure the Death Star works. Even if it's hard to understand how someone would condone mass genocide. You know, in his opinion, it's kind of like, well, we've got to establish order and peace. And the only way to do that is through violence. And,
yes.
And you know, if you really start to think about it,
Don't go there, Lark.
The rebels, I would say that they try to establish order and peace, but they use violence themselves. And I think Saw Gerrera, the reason he was important in this film is to show the rebels this is what happens when you go too far. You have Al-Qaeda dudes that are like blowing people up and little girls are crying, and like there is a limit to what you can do to fight the Empire. The ends don't justify the means. But going back to Orson Krennic, the scene, and I guess I'm just going to summarize my blog post here. The scene that I think I really enjoyed, and on further reflection, I think was a great character piece, was the scene where that you see him looking out over the beach, and there's all these explosions, right, cropping up, and you're like, oh shit, that's awesome. And the fanboy in you's like, oh shit, that's awesome. But you see all the other Imperial officers, and they're just sitting there, and he looks around and he's like, what are you doing? Like, he's like, put out the garrison or whatever he said, right? So what I think that scene shows is that you compare and contrast that with the rebels, right? The rebels are doing whatever it takes. They're attacking where they're unexpected. They have so much ingenuity, and they are survivors. You compare that with the Empire, where you have these men that are so conditioned, men and women that are so conditioned to take orders that when there's a crisis, they can't respond. They're waiting for orders. And I thought, even though like it's a small scene, and it probably was just to show the audience that there's a massive attack on the base, I still think it illustrates perfectly that that's why you love the rebels, because they are willing to take matters into their own hand, and they're smart. They adapt to the situation. They take that initiative. The what is it? The drive, they couldn't retrieve it, so they had to break the window and climb up to get it, and all these different like try-fail cycles. That's something that storytellers talk about. It's a tri-fail cycle is something where you have a main character or another character who has a goal they want to achieve. And the tri-fail cycle is the idea that you shouldn't achieve that goal on your first try. There's several different times we try it. They get the drive, but then they need the tower to go up, and then the guy gets the tower up, but then they need to defeat Orson, although that scene was kind of weird. That was the only scene that was a little disappointing to me, was her final confrontation with Orson. And I think that was because it was part of the reshoots. But what I'm trying to say is that Orson was a better villain than people are giving him credit for, and mainly because he wasn't so over the top, because he was somewhat relatable, and they had these interactions between him and Moff Tarkin and Vader where you're like, okay, this is just a dude who has a job to do, even though he's kind of a dick and kind of an evil guy. You could still understand where he's coming from. And he still has these things, rather than just being a mustache-twirling villain, like, let's kill the whole galaxy. He's, like, I want to demonstrate this station because I'm trying to impress the Emperor. So there you go. That's my first thing that I like that I don't think too many other people have talked about.
Oh, yeah, no, you make a lot of good points. And I think you touched on two things that I like a lot. And you talked about the kind of how we saw some more nuance with both the Empire and the Rebels. Now, a lot of Star Wars fans, they either want things to be really black and white, light and dark, blah, 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 or they really want things to be like, I feel like that you see this a lot in like the kind of the newer Star Wars fans. I guess I count as a newer one because I'm still a young guy, but the people who play like, the Old Republic, for example, I noticed a lot of the community are more like, well, maybe the Sith aren't that bad, and all that stuff. So like there's kind of a middle ground between that where I am, where it's like and I feel like this movie kind of reached that, where it's still clear that at the end of the day, the Empire is bad, quote unquote, the rebels are good, quote unquote, but we still see that there is nuance and humanity and mistakes on both sides. And even if their motivations, or even if the end result of their actions might be good or bad, you see the humanity on both sides, even if just a little bit. And you mentioned the villain. I had absolutely no problem with him, but then again, even though I'm like a big Jedi guy, a big Sith guy, and I'm a big Force user guy in terms of, my love of Star Wars, I've always had a thing for the non-Force using villains. Like I've always had a thing for Tarkin. I've always had a thing for this guy. I've always had a thing for the God, what was the young, basically like baby Hitler that was in episode 7.
General Hux.
Yes, yeah. I loved it. I love that shit because I love seeing those kind of like conniving, like,
Well, I
you
think it's
know,
the arrogance. Like Tarkin and Hux both have that
conniving
arrogance,
but it's also really cool seeing
the self-assuredness.
regular people, quote unquote, who legitimately believe in the Empire for one reason or another. Like you see that in the Old Republic, even though it's a different empire we're talking about. It's a
Sure.
similar thing because you're like, why would anybody fight for, like, willingly fight for this type of regime? And it's cool, like, investigating that kind of character, figuring out why they do what they do, why they're loyal, why they think the way they do. So I've always loved those types of villains. And I
Sure.
also just loved how the entire movie was just this guy's reputation falling apart around him. I thought it was hilarious and
And then he
awesome.
dies at the hands of his own weapon, literally,
Yep.
which is so ironic. Like he did this great achievement and then he dies because of it. Um, yeah. I don't know. I was gonna say, I had something to say, but I forgot what it was. Go on.
Oh no, that was pretty much. I was just responding to your energy there because
Oh,
I totally agree with
You're
you. I completely
matching
agree.
my vibes. All right, so
Yeah,
let's
right?
let's get native because that's what the internet wants. You guys have been waiting
All
for
right.
it. It's time to tear this movie apart, just like Red Letter Media. But okay, so let me take a second and say this. I'm not going to use the term as a writer too often, but I'm going to say it now. You have to be open to other opinions, and like you said, there is a period of time that I need to just kind of analyze a film on my own before I start thinking about like accepting other people's opinions and looking at what other people are saying. Simply because, you know, if you can't take a little criticism or if you can't accept that other people have different opinions, you're never going to grow as a writer. It's just the way it is. So, Red Letter Media put out a review on this film, basically kind of trashed it, but there was a few points that I kind of agreed with. However, I'm going to make a point of my own that they kind of touched on, but I think is the biggest problem with the film. Or as my blog post says, Jyn Erso is the biggest disappointment in this film. And I'll explain why. It's very simple. Characters need arcs. That's what makes them interesting. They start at a certain point, they end at a certain point. Okay, I can give you character arcs for all the characters in the original Star Wars movies, at least the three main ones. You know, Han Solo, Leia, and Luke. Luke starts out as a naive farm boy, gets caught up in something bigger than himself, and now he's a rebel pilot. Okay, Leia starts out as a sassy princess and then kisses her brother. Han starts out as a smuggler, right? And then he finds that he has a heart of gold, okay? And in this movie, I wouldn't say the arcs are massive. You have and I'm not going to get these names right probably. Cassian Andor, who is the kind of slimy rebel intelligence officer who goes from accepting orders blindly to deciding that he, you know, at the end, he kind of realizes I've got to, like, the rebellion is built on individuality. I've got to be able to make the calls when I need to. That's why he doesn't kill Galen Erso. And I thought that was a nice moment. Chirrut, who his arc isn't huge. It's just that he believes in the Force, and then the Force guides him at the end. And then his friend, Baze Malbus, I think, is his name. He is convinced at the end. He's skeptic that starts to believe in the Force again. But the one character who had the rockiest arc of all was Jyn Erso. And the reason is this. You don't know what her initial state is. Okay, we see her as a child. We're supposed to care about her because her mom got killed and her dad was abducted and the Empire is bad. And okay, but the problem is when you meet her, she's in an Imperial prison. Okay, so you're thinking, all right, she's still a rebel. That's not the case. You learn that she worked with Saul, but she's really apathetic towards the Empire and says something to the effect of, you know, being under the Empire isn't so bad if you don't look up. Which I find really ironic because of two reasons. One, you were just caught in an Imperial fucking prison. Like, how are you so nonchalant about the Empire? Like, you know, whatever. And also, your dad was abducted and your mom was killed by the Empire or Imperial officers. So it seems like to me there's this disconnect. And I kind of get what they were trying to go for, which is this kind of apathetic character who's like, what's the point? You know, what am I trying to do? I think what could have worked better is a character that felt like we can't fight the Empire because I've seen firsthand like the reach of the Empire and I fought with the rebels and it didn't do any good. And so she doesn't have much motivation to join the rebels in the beginning of the film. And then over time realizes some things are worth sacrificing your life for throughout the film. But you can't go like what I'm saying is you have no idea what she was doing at the beginning of this film. She's caught in jail, right? Or whatever, Imperial Labor Camp. I can't tell if it's a prison or a labor camp. And then she goes, she literally, if you think about it, the scene with Saw Gerrera is on Jeddah, okay? So she goes from that scene, and of course her father dies, and she must feel some kind of compulsion to do something. But she could just as easily, say, we got to get those plans, I'm out. But then she goes from that to giving this impassioned speech in the next act. Like the second act, the end of the second act before the third act. And you're like, literally in one act, we go from, Imperials, whatever, to this. And I don't think that character arc is earned or deserved. And two, I think it's too big of a change because we don't know what her initial state was. We knew that Luke wanted to fight the Empire, and he's naive. And I think that's one thing that this movie really, really highlights is how naive and ignorant Luke was at the beginning of A New Hope, where he's like, I gotta get off this rock. I'm gonna join the rebels. And doesn't realize that this is a cause that has been, like, the people have been fighting for decades, and they've lost their life. It's not an adventure. I mean, it is in A New Hope. That's why they couldn't have the types of things that happen in this movie, like where all the characters die, or where it's edgy, or not edgy, but where you have shades of gray with the rebels. It literally wouldn't work in those original films because you needed it black and white so that you could move the plot along and you didn't have to explore the kind of intricacies of dealing with, intergalactic terrorists, essentially. That's right, I'm saying it. Intergalactic terrorists. Saw Gerrera is basically the Al-Qaeda of the rebels. We know this, okay? Come on, dude.
Pretty much.
He is. So my point is that with a better character who had a better initial state and a more likable character, more importantly, I think some people who are quote-unquote bored by this movie, I've heard some people saying it was boring.
Really?
Yeah. I think people would have been more engaged with what happens, and they wouldn't have been annoyed as much by the fact that there's not a ton of really deep characters. You have all these characters you know a little bit about, like Chirrut, he's one of my favorite, dude, because to me, he harkens back to like the Yoda character of like the spiritual aspect of the Force that, it's not just like a cultish thing. It's a spiritual thing. You just believe in it, let the Force guide you type of thing. So I think that's the only thing I would really say that they could have done to improve the movie substantially is develop her character more and let us know who she was a little bit better. It just felt like she was a blank template that they wanted the audiences to put themselves on. And sometimes they do that with books. They do. I know they do it with stories where they don't want a character with really, really strong attributes because they want you as an audience member to imagine yourself in those boots. But it's like, doesn't really work so well, I think, sometimes. All right, so there you go. Tell me I'm wrong, please.
Well, first off, just to get really obnoxiously political, I would say that Saul is less Al-Qaeda and more the PLO. But anyway,
okay.
When you talk about Jyn Erso, I actually agree with you, but for different reasons.
Okay.
Because it seems like what you're saying isn't necessarily that her arc didn't make sense, but that it should have been fleshed out more.
Well,
because I can totally see somebody who, dad died, Empire destroyed everything, and, becoming more of like a rogue who tries to ignore the Empire rather than, somebody who's actively fighting it. Like, I mean, like, there's a lot of examples of people who, like, a certain government or authority, destroys their life, and they don't all end up, freedom fighters for the rest of their life going against it. But
sure.
I do agree with the essence of what you're saying. And I agree with what you said about there needed to be a bit more fleshing out of why she feels that way, of why she doesn't seem to care that much. Maybe she's just bearing it down because she doesn't want to deal with it. Maybe, we got a little bit of a sense of, her maybe having a falling out with Saul and all of that stuff, but we didn't see too much of it. So, I mean, maybe that should have been fleshed out a bit more. But honestly, the main reason why, and it's not that I didn't like her, I just thought that she was like definitely the weakest character of the movie. And
Sure.
that's not saying that much because I thought the characters were great, but comparatively, I do think she was definitely the weakest character of the movie, mostly because she just seemed to me kind of like Diet Ray without much of the charm and spunk or real development we saw with her.
Yeah.
He just seemed like Diet Ray.
That's what
You know
I'm
I
trying to
mean?
say. Is it beyond the fact that what my point was is that I'm not saying an apathetic character wouldn't make sense. I think it would make a ton of sense that Empire has taken so much from her and she kind of feels like, well, we can't fight them. We have to just deal with it. Right? But even that wasn't communicated. It was just kind of like, and it would have been a slight change. It would have been a very fixable thing, in my opinion. But I don't want to interrupt you. What else were you saying though?
Oh no. That was the basis of my point. That I do agree with you about Jin, just for slightly different reasons. But I do agree that her arc definitely could have been fleshed out more.
It's functional. Like, it makes sense when people that are saying there's, oh, she goes from this to this with no explanation. That's not quite true. She goes from, why'd she help the rebels? Because they threatened to throw her back in Imperial base. Why did she decide to, get the Death Star plans? Because her father died for that purpose. And seeing her father die, I'm sure, moved her. But at the same time, when you're watching that scene, to me, I get choked up. I'll tell you where I get choked up. I get choked up at the scene where Chirrut, who's the dude with the staff and who's blind, Donnie Yen, he's at the end of the movie, shit is fucked 3 ways to Sunday, and he decides, I'm going to walk out in the middle of a firefight just saying, I'm the force of me, I am one with the force, or that's what it is.
Yeah.
Force of me, I'm one with the force. It is that absolute faith. The faith that I think that the original trilogy got so right and the prequels got so wrong. And I'm not even gonna try and get religious here, but I could literally do a sermon, because I'm actually Christian, believe it or not, on Yoda and Empire Strikes Back with the faith to move the X-Wing, basically believing in something despite the fact that there's no reason you should. Like, this dude is blind. Okay, he's wandering out into a battlefield hoping that the Force guides him and protects him. That is the ultimate, like, the chair test where they say, what is faith? And you're like, I don't know. And then they prove to you by saying, sit down. And you sit down. And they say, well, you have faith that the chair is going to hold you up. In this case, this dude's like, I have faith that the Force is going to guide me to this point. I'm going to put my life in the hands of the Force, walk out here, which is completely against any logical, rational sense. And he still manages to do it. And it's that faith that guides him and gets him there. I don't want to get too religious, but I'm just saying that was one of my favorite moments because it harkens back again to like the old style with Yoda and Obi-Wan, where it's not this weird cultish, no emotional bullshit. It's this idea that there's something bigger than you, right? Something that binds us, something that brings life and enhances life. And there's, I wouldn't say a purpose with the Force, but the Force has a will. Like, you can listen to the Force and see what it wants. I thought that scene, but I never got that character sensation, that excitement for the character with Jin. It was just kind of like, I'm sorry to see Galen die. And, it was Definitely. Cool when she decided, I'm going to try and rally these rebels, but it didn't, it wasn't there 100%,
And the thing that I liked about it, and I totally agree, I loved both of those characters so much. And that was the scene that really did me in too.
No beat scene with him and Maze.
What'd you say?
Him and Baze, the dude with the huge gun.
Yeah. That was the scene that did me in as well. And the thing that I liked about it was that, this is kind of a pun, but it wasn't blind faith, It was directed toward a purpose. Like, and I kind of like that. And you made a good point about how the Jedi were kind of portrayed in the prequels. And I'll admit, I don't hate the prequels as much as you seem to. I do dislike them, but not as much as you seem to. So I'm okay with a lot of the way the Jedi were portrayed, but that was one thing where it's like, I don't know, there was, and maybe this was intentional, but there was that kind of like, kind of cultish, bureaucratic, it
felt more like
to the whole thing.
The Catholic Church in the prequels, and more like,
and I think that
like
was
Buddhism in the original trilogy.
Yeah, to be fair, I think that was kind of intentional though, because I mean the Jedi Order was kind of going downhill at that point. But regardless, the reason why I liked that scene so much is because again, like it the idea of him putting his faith in the Force was also him putting his faith, kind of like what you were saying, in something bigger than himself, in something more important than his individuality. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like like even if you were to take the Force out of this, like even if like anybody who is or isn't spiritual in any way, like even if you want to take any of that out of it, he put his faith in something bigger than himself, something that if he could accomplish this would have helped far more people than if he had just cowered and done nothing. That's what I thought was so impactful about that. He went out there in the face of chaos, but literally the Star Wars equivalent of D-Day, and got the job done. That was so cool to me. And also, I mean, you saw the progression with his friend there, kind of a Han Solo-esque progression of, not believing in the Force to, being open to it and whatnot. And I feel like those two characters as a unit had more development than Jin did.
I would agree.
At least more of a compelling.
It was more emotionally resonant with me.
Yeah, because she did develop, but some people are saying she developed too quickly or that it didn't make sense.
It just didn't resonate with me.
Yeah, she did definitely develop, but their development resonated with me more.
Agreed.
I also loved I just really liked this character, and I'm bad with the names. The guy who was the pilot who ended up helping them. Yeah, Bodhi. I just really liked this character, and I liked his character for a similar reason that I liked Finn in episode 7. That I love seeing the humanity in the stormtroopers or the Imperial officers.
I think that's something they're doing very consciously, especially with Finn. Yeah. Is that they're trying to show that these people aren't automatons. Whereas in and I totally get it. For the original trilogy, you don't have the time to fully develop the Empire and the Rebellion. You need it as black and white. Those films have to be black and white. He couldn't have done a 2-hour film where you're like, well, the Rebels are kind of good, but the Empire is kind of bad. But there's also heroes on both sides. Sorry, George Lucas. My point is, it worked for those films, but if you're going to continue to expand this universe and do film after film, you have to adjust the spectrum of good and bad. There has to, and I'm waiting for the day that you have an Imperial officer who you really feel like this guy's actually pretty good. It's not quite there yet. Finn kind of leaves the Empire, and obviously because he feels like it, or not the Empire, the First Order. He leaves the First Order because he feels like what they're doing is wrong. But I'm waiting for an Imperial officer where you can really feel like, okay, this dude is a good dude. He's just fooled. And it might come soon. It may happen eventually.
I hope that they continue to tread this line, because I feel like they're treading it well.
I do.
Because again, it's so easy to fall into the trap of complete moral relativism, and at that point it becomes boring to me.
Right. No, you need to have a sense that there is one side that is fighting for a just cause.
Fight for. There's someone doing something right or wrong. Because I mean, moral relativity is a real thing. It always will be. There isn't that much absolute good or absolute evil that we can, comprehend or really have a debate over. But the idea of absolute moral relativity, it's so hard to say moral relativity, but I feel like that often ruins stories in a lot of ways. Because if you completely say that both of these sides are completely equal, both sides suck, they both are terrible. If you create a false equivalency, then there's nothing to root for. There's nothing to believe in. There's nothing to get emotionally invested in. So I do hope that they continue to show the humanity of the Empire and the First Order, or any Sith or other dark side affiliated civilization or government or authority or whatever. But I do hope they keep treading the line in this way, where we still get the sense that there is a good and a bad. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, there is a side that's trying to do the right thing, and there is a side that is oppressive and what have you. You know what I mean?
See, and that's the space I really want them to explore at some point, is the idea that the Jedi aren't just the good guys and the Sith just aren't the bad guys. The thing that distinguishes them, the main thing that distinguishes the Jedi and the Sith, at least in the expanded universe, was their philosophy on the Force. The Jedi believe that a passive stance is the way to go. You don't exert your will on the universe. You don't use the Force to control people. Although that's why kind of Qui-Gon Jinn. Yeah. Anyways, so the Sith, on the other hand, believe that using the Force, whatever the case may be, it ends justify the means type of things, right? They think that, you know, the Force is a tool. They're going to use it. That's why they, you know, Force lightning is fine. Like the difference between the dark side and light side has 100% to do with perspective. That's at least that's my experience for reading the expanded universe, and I really want them.
I would definitely say that one perspective is wrong.
Sure,
but
I'm saying that there are
I'm a
Sith,
hard line Jedi guy.
There are
dude.
Sith that have good intentions, but terrible methods.
I love the Sith for fun. Like I often play Sith or dark side characters in like Star Wars video games and RPGs and shit.
Yeah.
But like, if we're gonna have this conversation, I am Jedi to the fucking core.
Should we save this conversation for later?
I don't know if you. I don't know. I'm just saying because we can.
Sith advocate.
We can.
Sith may play.
We can definitely have a conversation about that because see the thing. I'll just say this: the thing that people don't get about the Jedi, especially the people who try to make this false equivalency between the Sith and the Jedi,
they're not the same thing. No,
people think that the Jedi want everybody to be like them, and that's not true. People think that the Jedi want everybody to be emotionless. They think they want everybody to, you know, not fall in love and whatnot. And that's not true. The Jedi are just saying, hey, yeah, we have these freaking ridiculous demigod-like powers. We should probably try to use them as wisely as possible. And we're also supposed to be, you know, judges and arbiters and negotiators. And, you know, we're bound by things like logic and reason and science. Maybe we shouldn't, you know, let ourselves get too attached to individuals and instead just try to look impartially at the world and solve problems. Leave the emotional stuff to the politicians and the soldiers and stuff. We're going to be that voice that comes in and gives people an impartial, reasoned opinion on the world. That's the way the Jedi are. So like, that's why I don't get when people are like, oh, well, the Jedi, you know, they don't believe in love. They don't believe in, you know, emotion. And that's not really the case. It's just they live that way so other people don't have to.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Before we close real quick and get to your wonderful emotional tale of drunkenry, I actually wanted to point out something that my friend of mine made a remark about that I didn't really consider and I think is interesting. And I also picked up something in The Force Awakens that I think would corroborate with his idea. The idea being that Vader is in a constant state of pain, even with a mechanical suit. And so in Rogue One, you see him in a bacta tank, right? And that's when he's meditating or whatever. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. So he's in a constant state of pain. That pain fuels his Force energy, and so when he's in battle, he uses that pain to his advantage, and that makes perfect sense. And then I went back and rewatched The Force Awakens, I think yesterday actually, and I was watching the scene where Kylo Ren's wounded, and he's beating his wound as he's fighting Finn and Rey, and I'm like, you know what? This dude has a good point because he's probably doing that to kind of use that pain to channel his dark side energy, like those strong emotions, pain and discomfort being a strong emotion, and using that to power himself as he's fighting Finn and Rey. So I thought that was an interesting point that I'd never really considered. So anyways, I thought that was a neat little thing showing the bacta tank, given that idea that maybe Vader is in a constant state of pain and he uses that, and that's why he's so powerful. One of the reasons he's so powerful.
Oh, yeah. And just before we close this, can we just talk about how badass Vader was in that movie? I know you touched on it earlier, but we really need to just address the elephant in the room. That scene. Now, you got to understand, like, I first saw the Star Wars movies when I was like 3 or 4. So probably before that, honestly. So my only real perception of Vader on the big screen was, you know, what we saw in the original trilogy, and you know, like that was super cool, right? But I never got that original perception people got in the 70s watching that guy, and that was like nothing they'd ever seen before. You know what I mean? So like that was one of the first things I saw in my life.
Sure.
quite honestly. So that it's like Vader was like, I don't want to say normal to me. He was still probably
You
my
didn't
favorite
fully
villain of all time
comprehend
as a
the
kid.
majesty
I didn't fully comprehend the way people in the 70s felt when they saw Vader.
until this scene.
Now, when I saw that scene, the movie immediately became a horror movie for 1 minute.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ. I have never been more scared in a Star Wars movie than in that one scene. Holy fucking shit. That's all I have to say about that. I just
I'm
had
going
to
to
get
be
that
even
out.
quicker than that. I had the biggest nerd boner of my life watching that scene. And I know that that's something that people are like, oh, that's the only reason you like this film. Like, but I don't give a shit. It was worth it. It was worth $10, $11 to just to see that 1 minute scene. Because you're like, this is Vader.
To see Vader
back at his
massacring
prime,
people.
and this is why people feared him. So, anyways. So that's our wrap up of Star Wars. What did you think? I don't give a shit, but just tell me anyway. I'm just kidding. Tell me what you thought.
You know, you probably pissed off so many of our viewers in this episode.
Pissing
Please don't
everybody
unsubscribe.
off.
We love you.
I'm indifferent. I'm like Jin. I'm apathetic.
I mean, I liked the movie a lot. I very much enjoyed it.
I did too.
I'm glad to see I'm not the only one who thought the first kind of third of that movie was kind of disjointed.
It was.
But all in all, I loved it. I would love to see it again.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'd still have to say I like episode 7 more.
Mm-hmm. I'm in the same way. I'm the same way. Overall, 7 had a better, overall the quality was better throughout 7.
Yeah, and the chemistry between the characters I think was better too. But I would love to see more of these. I would love to see more of these little spin-offs.
I think they proved that the anthology films can be worthwhile at the very least and enhance the originals, which is good.
Yeah.
All right, so let's hear about your drunken story because I've been waiting for 40 minutes to hear this great story.
So I'm not that much of a partier unless you consider drinking Baileys and playing Super Smash Brothers to be that much of a partier.
And that's the end of the episode.
So my story, I had to cut out a lot of stuff. So let me give you this, okay? So you can cut that first story out because I have a much better one. Okay. Are you ready?
It's gonna be like an hour and a half. Go ahead.
No. You can cut out the first story I told because halfway through I realized there's so much I can't say, so I had to cut out all the good stuff.
Sure.
You can cut that whole first story because I got a much better story that I can tell.
All right.
Mostly because it doesn't involve me directly. It involves my best friend, who shall remain nameless in this story.
Okay.
Because it is very embarrassing.
I still want to see that photo.
Oh, I will show you that photo. But yeah, cut out the first story. This
might just be its own separate episode. I'm going to call it, maybe this will be like war stories from Game Mark and Psychotrip. I don't know.
Drunken war stories. But anyway, okay. So this was spring break, I think 2 years ago. So this was the first time, because I told you that there's only been a few times when we've had, nights of drunken debauchery.
Sure.
This was the first time that we really acted like stereotypical college students. So we are in Panama City Beach. One of my really good friends, he was always kind of the ringleader of the group. He got us this awesome suite in this resort. I don't know how he swindled this deal, but he did.
Yeah.
He conned somebody. I don't know what the deal did. It was the best suite, awesome view, perfect. Okay, so we were at spring break for a few days. We, have the typical days of drinking and stuff. I saw a guy in a bunny suit try to sell me acid. I almost did, but I turned him down because, he's in a fucking bunny suit in 80-degree weather. What the hell is wrong with him? Mm-hmm. But anyway, so
typical stuff.
Typical spring break stuff. So the one day we decided, like half of my group decided to have some, innocent fun.
Sure.
Do something not drinking related. Was the day that the other half of my group had the worst day of their life.
Okay.
So let me tell you what happened with us to, set the scene for the contrast of what's about to happen.
Sure.
So me, a good friend of mine, and two girls we know who are, both, moderate friends of ours, went with us to this indoor amusement park / science museum. So we're having a great time, on giant trampolines, flight simulators, seeing all sorts of crazy technology and going on weird rides and crap. So we have a great day. We leave. We're like, oh, I bet they didn't have as much fun as we did because we heard that the other group of our friends were going down to the other side of the beach where the party was happening. So we're like, oh, I bet they're just drunk and aren't having that much of a good time. So we start walking down towards the beach because one of my friends wants a churro. So I'm like, all right, let's find you a churro, whatever. Maybe we'll run into our friends. It was at this point we saw a cop car go down the road.
No.
Now we're like, okay, maybe somebody just got rowdy. Spring break, right, guys? Then we saw some prisoner vans go by. Or whatever they call them. Then
Paddy
we
wagon.
saw, I swear, paddy wagon. Then we saw SWAT vehicles. Then we saw unmarked black SUVs. The ones with like the sirens on the inside that you can't tell until they're on? Yeah, those sirens are on, and they're zooming down the road. So me and my friend, this is my other best friend, by the way. So we've always had almost like a telepathic link with one another. So the two girls still wanted to get the churro. And I'm just looking at my friend like, we're not getting that churro. So we're telling them, we need to go in the other direction because we could keep going down, or we could take a right and be right at the place we're staying. And they're like, no, we want the churro. So I look at my friend, and we both have this look like, if they keep going down here, we're just gonna leave them because we are not going.
Okay.
Near, like, we were about to abandon them. We're gonna try not to, but that was gonna be plan B. We are not going down where apparently a fucking war zone is happening to get a churro. So we end up convincing them to go with us to the back home. So we go to the apartment, open the door, and then a good friend of ours, he's actually another YouTuber, Rashad. You might know him as Rashad the Reactor.
Okay.
He opens the door. And he's like, oh my God, guys, have you seen blah, 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 blah? My friend who organized this whole thing. He's like, is he with you? And we're like, no. I'm just going to call the friend T for now. It's like, is he with you? No. Oh my God, guys, they don't know where T is. We still don't know where he is. And we're just like, what the hell happened? We walk inside and the apartment is a war zone, okay? And my other best friend, let's call him M, is passed out drunk on the bunk bed, and they're trying to nurse him back to health because he might be dying.
Okay.
So this is when we find out what happened on the other side of that day. So while we were having a bunch of, happy-go-lucky childish fun, they had a chaotic day of drunken debauchery. They drink some Everclear. Bad idea.
Sure.
Terrible idea. First bad idea. Go down to the beach. And these girls who were there gave them more drinks. Now, you know how they always tell, women never take a drink from a guy when you didn't see him pour it? Well, they probably should have taken that advice too, because next thing my friends know, they are doing things for Mardi Gras beads. And you know how Mardi Gras beads work, right?
Yeah, I know.
So we had brought so many beads. Because, we're stupid college kids. We want to, give some girls some beads and, see what happens. They ended that day with more beads than they started with.
The girls did.
No, they did. My friends.
Okay.
My male friends.
So, all right. I think I can follow what's happening. Okay.
Yeah, they showed their junk to the chicks for beads.
Okay.
I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, I'd do it.
So to make matters worse, M and T end up getting separated.
Okay.
In the chaos. So M ends up coming back to what we call base camp, which is where we kept all our backpacks and cell phones and everything, with my friend B, who was there, taking a break for the day as well. So he has this whole other story about how he kept getting accosted by like Mormon missionaries and shit, but that's a story for another time.
Okay.
So my friend M comes back totally out of it, totally zonked, throwing up everywhere.
Yeah.
And my friend B basically has to make sure this guy doesn't die. Meanwhile, everybody is coming by, taking pictures with them, posting this stuff on Instagram. My friend was trending for a day. I am not even kidding.
Wait, people are coming to your hotel room to see this dude?
No, this is the little base camp area we had on the beach.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, on the beach.
So people kept coming up to him. Either they had seen what he had did at the party, or they just were like, looking at the drunk guy.
What did he do?
He showed his junk to a bunch of people for beads.
For beads. Okay, I got it. So they wanted to see the dude.
Who knows what else he did?
Okay.
We still don't know exactly what happened, right? So all we know is that he ended up trending on Twitter and Instagram for like a day.
That's fantastic.
Spring break. So my friend B ended up taking him back to the apartment area or the hotel, whatever you want to call it. So meanwhile, nobody knows where T is.
Okay.
Nobody does for hours. So they thought, and remember all those cop cars that went down there.
Yeah.
So they thought that T was with us, that he met up with us or something. So when they didn't see him with us, they were totally freaking out. So meanwhile, we're trying to nurse my friend M back to health, giving him water, food, everything. And then all of a sudden, we hear a knock on the door. This is hours later. It's already night.
And you're back at the hotel.
We're back at the hotel now. We open the door, and there's T there. Now, he literally cannot speak.
Okay.
All he can do is giggle.
Okay.
He just opens the door, and he's just like, like, oh my God, T, where the fuck have you been? How could you leave Morgan there? Blah, 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 blah. For like 3 hours, he can't talk. All he can do is giggle. So we have a giggling asshole on one hand, a dying friend on the other hand, and the rest of us are just trying to piece together the story of what happened. To this day, we still do not know what all those cop cars were for, if it had anything to do with them, or what more they did than what they remember. All we know
It's a perfect story.
is that M was trending, T couldn't stop giggling, there were SWAT teams going down to the beach.
And it could have been related.
Could have. We still do not know. And it's worth noting that after that incident, I think the mayor of Panama City Beach, or someone who was in charge of the place, said no more spring break here. I don't know if they still kept that ban. They probably didn't, because it's one of the most famous spring break locations. But he said spring break is not allowed in this city anymore. We are not going to encourage people to come here for spring break. We're not doing anything like that. So that is the story of how we essentially shut down spring break in an entire city in one day.
All right. Bravo. Hold up. I think I'm going to separate this episode and just make it a in-between episode, because we had some good drunk stories. So anyways, now y'all got to know us a little bit better. That's not the only drunk story I have, but it's a decent one. And Trip has provided not one, but two. And since I'm trying to be a responsible adult, my New Year's was basically just me getting drunk, playing Battlefield 1 and Mario Kart, and just having fun. But it's good. It's good. Sometimes you have those moments where you're like, I don't know what's happening. All right. Well, that about wraps it up. So, you have any last thoughts, Trip?
I enjoyed Rogue One, and I would have traded Lark's New Year's for mine.
Alrighty. That's about it. See you next time.
All right.
Devils.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.